Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Let us know where you are tuning in from. I am in Seattle. Katie is actually in Ohio. Kate's in Spokane. Where are you? North Carolina. Hello and welcome. We'll let a few more people get tuned in, and then I will get started with the introduction. California, San Francisco. Hello, welcome. Celebration, Florida. I love it. St. Paul, welcome. All right. Give it just a few more seconds. Thank you for your patience. Chicago, hello, welcome. Atlanta, hello. Wait, have we had anyone from Seattle yet? Kate and Katie, you are just talking to, you're only talking to me. Set your things so that you're talking to everyone. All right. Yes, you did. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I'm Laura Hamilton. I have a cookbook shop here in Seattle that's called Book Larder. We have just started to do some cooking classes and just a few in-person author talks. But for the time being, we are doing most of our author talks here on Zoom. And the really fun part about that is that we can have people from all over the country join us. And we can do a conversation like the one tonight, where our authors are in different cities and they're going to talk to each other. And we're going to have a really great evening that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do were it not for this wonderful technology that we've all spent so much time on for the past couple of years. So thank you again for being here. We are so happy tonight to welcome Kate Lebo, author of The Book of Difficult Fruit, and her friend Katie Quinn, author of Cheese, Wine, and Bread. They are going to read from and basically interview each other about their two wonderful books. I will drop links to the books in the chat, so you can support the talk by purchasing one or both of them from us if you are so inclined. And for for orders that are placed, you will get a Difficult Fruit, a Jones & Co. vanilla bean that Kate, oh man, I guess I can go either way, that Kate was so able to procure for us. They are, like I said, going to read from their books, talk about their books, but they will, of course, also leave time for questions. So if you have questions, if you could please use that little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. They will leave time at the end of the talk for those. We are recording the talk tonight, and so if you have to pop off early or you want to watch it later or you want to share it with friends, we will send you a link to that. It'll be on our YouTube channel as soon as it's available. And we have over 100 author talks there. So if you haven't checked out that channel, I highly suggest that you do, especially if you've got baking projects or anything going on over the next couple of weeks where you want sort of some friendly conversation in the background. There's some really great stuff up there. All right, so please join me in welcoming Kate Lebo and Katie Quinn.
That's my cue, right?
Yes. And it's my cue to drop off.
All right, thanks for
Bye.
Thanks, Laura.
Yay.
Hi, Kate. Hi, Kate. Good to see you.
What's happening?
So hi, everyone else too. We can't see you, but we can feel you. We can feel your vibes, and thanks for everyone who's shouted out in the comments. We're really excited to be here with you all and to talk to each other. I'm super excited to talk to Kate, and thank you, Book Larder, and thank you, Laura, for hosting us. We're really excited. So how did Kate and I meet? Laura very generously, just in that introduction, called us friends, and I'll take that because Kate, I think we're friends now.
I'll
I don't
take
know.
that
I
too.
hope. I'll take you as a friend happily, because it all began as a bit of a writer crush, I guess I would say. But Charlotte Druckmann, who's a very, very talented author in and of herself and a fantastic journalist, after she interviewed me for a Wall Street Journal piece, we were following up an email, and she was like, "Are you familiar with Kate Lebo? Because I just think you two would just hit it off, and I would love to see an event with you two together." And I was like, "Well, gosh, okay, I respect her so much." And the rave thing she said about Kate, I like immediately did my little research slash stalking and was like, yeah, oh, wait, this person's amazing. The things she's done, the things she's written, I would love to meet her. So basically reached
Charlotte.
out. Yeah,
What
yeah.
about having a Yenta you don't even know, a friend Yenta? I've never met Charlotte, but that's
friend Yenta. That's the best. That's the best description ever.
Yeah.
And true. And so anyway, Kate and I connected, and we kind of hit it off, and we're like, yeah, let's try and do something together.
Yeah, I think one of the things we were trying to figure out is, I mean, we're both putting books out in the middle of this pandemic. It's actually weirdly a good time to be reading about food, but it's not a great time to go out in the world and, do what you usually do when you put a book out, which is try to go make some friends, and readers in person. So I was so excited when your email appeared saying, hey, you want to try to do something together? It felt, I guess, in part because I've been craving the conversations that come only when a book is new, only when it's out in the world.
Yes.
So I'm glad that we get to do this. Thank you for
it is such a beautiful like ethereal time, and to really capture it. I'm glad we're capturing it, Kate,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that everyone's here with us. I love your book. I'm just shy of obsessed with it. So I can't wait to ask you questions that came up as I was reading it, and it's just such a special book and such a treat. And for anyone,
can you hear my kid outside? Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry, that's gonna come and help.
I think he's just like, yeah, mom's book is awesome. That's true. And so it's spot on. Okay, so before I get to scratch my curiosity itch and ask you all about your book, and you're going to ask me questions about my book. First, we're going to read a bit from our book. So, Kate, would you like to go first?
Yes, I'm going to check really quick though, because he's crying right outside my office door. Sorry, everybody, hold on really quick.
Go for it.
Okay.
I will be here to juggle. No, I'm just kidding. I don't have any juggling things. So I imagine that a lot of you probably know a bit about what our books are about. Mine, Cheese, Wine, and Bread is, oops, I just dropped something. Cheese, Wine, and Bread is quite obviously, it is what it says on the tin. Cheese, wine, it's about cheese, wine, and bread. The Book of Difficult Fruit, I think it's a bit more of a, it's a bit slightly more mysterious of a title, and we can talk about that later. I was going to just give a quick, Kate, while you were gone, I was thinking of like a quick recap of what your book is about, or do you just want to go ahead and?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry,
okay.
Everyone. He's fine. He just wants to come hang out, and it's not allowed.
Oh.
So he's now with his dad. All right. So what I'm going to do, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Laura, for having me. I miss Seattle and I miss the Book Larder so much. I know there's so many people in the audience who are not from Seattle, which is fantastic. So when you come and visit, head straight to Fremont and go to the Book Larder and say hi to Laura. Okay. So this is the Book of Difficult Fruit. Arguments for the tart, tender, and unruly. By way of giving you an elevator pitch, I think I'm just going to read you one of the very first sections. It's called A Note on Difficult Fruit. It'll tell you what I'm all about. Fruit is how I best relate to plants, being myself an animal and hungry. You do not eat that which rips your heart with joy, Thomas Lux writes. But of course you do. We, the animals, are pleased to fulfill fruit's highest purpose, after frost and flower and water and light, to be cherished, carried off, and gobbled, core flung from a window, pit hawked over a rail, seed shit in the dirt under the sun. In this book, fruit is not the smooth-skinned, bright-hued, waxed, and edible ovary of the grocery store, nor is it a symbol of goodness and kindness and productivity and the virtues of civilization. Here, fruit is difficult. Blackberries are invasive. Huckleberries can't be farmed. Medlars must rot in order to sweeten. Wheatberry dust is more explosive than gunpowder. Consider the apricot. To a small child, apricot kernels can be toxic if eaten. To the sick, the same kernels might be medicine. To the cook, they are a secret source of flavor. To the consumer who knows no better, the pit and kernel are garbage to throw out, which suits the fruit best of all. Fruit of the womb, we say, or fruits of my labor. What precedes the bounty contained by these cliches, the thing obscured but not erased by the feast, the mechanism that brings fruit to fruition, is pain. Each fruit in this book is difficult in its own way. Some are impossible to domesticate or tough to prepare. Some can be medicine or poison, depending on the size of the dose. Some are an acquired taste. Some can't even be acquired. Here, their culinary, medicinal, historical, cosmetic, and cultural roles show us where what nurtures and what harms are entangled. Imagine a blackberry briar, forbidding and sweet, and follow me in. Da, da, da. All right, so I'm now going to read you a short chapter, my Q chapter. This goes from A to Z, so I go from aronia to zucchini all the way through the alphabet. Yes, at one point I wished I'd chosen a different alphabet than the English alphabet, one with fewer letters, maybe the Hebrew alphabet. How many letters does it have? Anyway, okay, Quinn. How do I describe this? One October day, a friend brought a sack of quince to work and told me it was mine if I wanted it. The fruit was yellow under a scrim of gray fuzz, voluptuous and firm like pregnant pears. I reached in, pulled one out, held it to my face. I sniffed the stem ends and shoulders, then turned the quince over and smelled the divot where a brittle brown star echoed the fruit's former blossom. I could say this quince smelled like roses and citrus and rich women's perfume. That isn't quite true. I could call this fruit stranger based on what John Gardner called one of two possible plots in all of fiction. A stranger comes to town. Man goes on a journey, being the other. Calling quince the stranger would be fitting for a tale about the fruit of rooted things, written by a woman whose female forebears did not make journeys. Instead, they turn inward. My grandmother at her TV, my other grandmother in her garden. My grandmothers escaped fathers and siblings by falling in love. They married and moved away and labored in little suburban houses where they did not speak of God, but gathered his artifacts around them, crosses and figurines that claimed the chapel of the living room, the sanctuary of the lawn. I inhaled this stranger, my first quince, until my nose lost track of honey and citrus, but still held a wisp of cool, clean peel, an idea of sweetness, a thin hit of rose. To get my pleasure back, I could have waited for my senses to calm down. Instead, I did as the fruit's generous shoulders seemed to suggest. I bit one. The quince was firmer than an apple. I felt for a moment like I was using my teeth as a knife. Then an astringent sour sensation wicked all the moisture from my mouth. I stood dumb, cotton-timed, the quince loose in my hand. I'd expected it to taste the way it smelled. The rabbinical traditions of the Jews make it the most ancient of all our fruits, dating back to the Garden of Eden, writes William Withermeach in Quince Culture, 1888. There, by its exquisite beauty and delightful fragrance, the quince tempts Eve to commit her first disobedience, the bite of voluptuous, sour fruit that opens her eyes to good and evil and exiles her descendants from paradise. Tepuach, the Hebrew word for apple, may also refer to citron, apricot, or quince. Many scholars argue for quince because it is the only fruit of these four that is native to Persia and Palestine. The Song of Solomon, then, does not comfort with apples. Nor are quince ready for consumption the moment they are picked, the way apples are. A quince needs the heat of a sauté pan or the roasting of an oven to become suitable company for a meal. It is a cook's fruit. It is difficult. As quince stews, its cream white flesh turns deep rose, and its fragrance transforms from something heavenly to something earthbound, but still delicious. Quince has a satisfying grainy texture when cooked, like a pear that has kept its composure. If you've seen quince before, it's likely been in an extreme version of this state, as membrillo, also called quince paste or fruit cheese, which can be made by cooking the fruit with sugar over low heat until it is thick and concentrated and rose-colored, cooling it in a tureen, and then serving it with manchego, bread. Quince can take this solid shape because its flesh, seeds, and skin contain large quantities of pectin. Place quince seeds in a cup of water and walk away. When you return, the cup will be thick with gel. Some internet sources link the decline of quince production to the invention of pectin extract for household jam making, which happened in 1908. But as far as I can tell, this is a rumor. Quince was losing friends before Pomona's pectin came along. It was so unpopular 20 years before, in 1888, that William Whitler Meach was moved to write the first comprehensive guide of quince before it fell into obscurity. By the time my father's mother was born in 1922, quince wasn't a secret to be discovered or a mystery to be solved. It wasn't even a rumor. She'd never heard of it. It didn't exist. I shouldn't say this, my grandmother Loretta admits, but I was not happy when I got pregnant 3 months after I had your uncle. I was sick every day of all my pregnancies. My grandmother has, in a way I am by now familiar with, separated her love for her children from her personal frustrations so that they run on parallel tracks of what she endured and how she felt about it. Whom she was pregnant with, my father, is a detail we can skip. Any unhappiness she felt was not because of him. 8 years after my dad was born, my grandparents adopted 2 more children, girls we do not talk about. The day I found out about them, I was sitting on the floor of my grandparents' basement, cross-legged behind a bar whose cabinets were stuffed with boxes of photos. The sun filtered down from the top of the room, strong at the ceiling, but weak at the floor. When I came upon a few snapshots of little blonde girls, I had to stand to see them clearly. I didn't think much of them at first. They could have been the neighbor's kids. Then I found a family portrait, shot with the soft light and neutral smiles of a photography studio. There was my father when he was my age at the time, 11 years old. There were my uncles, 12 and 25. There was my grandfather. And there on my grandmother's lap, 2 blonde babies. That day, I studied the photo for a minute, then put it away. I put all the photos away. Who were those girls? I did not ask my grandparents. Who were those girls? I did not ask my father. Who were those girls? I did ask my mother, weeks later. Your aunts, she said. Paradisa, ancient Persian for place surrounded by walls, is the root of the word paradise. In the Middle Ages, Eden was imagined as an actual place at the edge of the map and remembered, as it still is in Judeo-Christian and Muslim cultures, as a lost paradise where man's innocence gave him a direct line to God. Walled gardens in private homes and monasteries mediated between indoor space and the rural or urban wilderness outside, providing an in-between enclosure. In Europe, these gardens were planted with medicinal herbs, space-shaping hedges, and fruit-bearing trees. Within these walls, quince trees were common. They were one of the first trees to bloom. Their branches visually bridged the sky and the earth. The pectin within their flesh firmed the household's runny jams. A Christian version of these gardens was called hortus conclusus, enclosed garden. Such enclosures symbolized the Virgin Mary's womb, her innocence as she prepared to receive the seed of God. This enclosed garden was an echo of paradise. Constructing, maintaining, and sitting within one were all ways to channel prayer and thought and reach past human frailty. A quince tree cloistered there symbolized Christ, the tree of life. A bite of quince opens Eve's eyes, so God throws her out of paradise. When I was a young girl, cheering for Eve's bite felt like an open secret. Who among us wouldn't make the same choice? Who among us wouldn't think you'd be an idiot to abstain? They were bad girls, my aunts. When I asked family about them, first as a child, Then again and again over the years, whenever it seems we're in the mood to talk about tender subjects, this is the feminine shape the truth takes, in answer to my question that still doesn't tell me what I want to know. Bad girls who left the family, bad girls cast out. Before I discovered my aunts, I thought we were less troubled than other families. Now I knew it was possible to disappear from this family, to be loved and raised and erased. The summer before I went to college, I finally asked my father about his sisters. They did not obey the rules of the house, he said. They left, he said. He'd been away at Iowa State then, about to move to the West Coast with my mother. He didn't know what happened. I was almost 30 when I asked my elder uncle directly what the girls had done. They did not obey the rules, he said. They were bad girls. My grandmother has acknowledged their existence to me only once. My grandfather was sick at the time, maybe dying. We were talking about getting used to that idea. I won't be happy when it happens, she said. I asked if they wanted to see their daughters before he maybe, possibly, we weren't quite saying died. No, she said, grimacing like I'd served her something sour. I do not. What could a teenage girl do that still looks monstrous decades later? How could some girls go so bad that we still can't describe it? Far past my teenage years, the dangerous age, I asked my father, what do we have to do in this family to be kicked out? Nothing, he said. There's nothing you can do. I remained protected and closed, a good girl. Eve told the serpent, we may eat the fruit of the trees in the garden. It is only about the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden that God said, you shall not eat it or even touch it lest you die. You certainly will not die, the serpent said. The fruit was curvy and firm, bright yellow under a gray beard. It smelled like roses and citrus and rich women's perfume, like nothing she'd ever smelled before. She pulled it from the tree and ran her thumb over the skin. The fuzz came off like dust. She held the fruit to her face. She took deep breaths at its stem and curves and bottom until its scent overwhelmed her and wasn't enough. Thank you. All right, so that's a taste of the Book of Difficult Fruit. Katie, would you give us a taste of this wonderful cheese, wine, and bread?
I would love to, and I love the taste word that you're using because of, obviously, taste has everything to do with both of our books. I love the excerpt you just read, Kate. I couldn't believe at the end when you actually answered those questions I'd had, and that it really came full circle. Y'all just got to get the book and you got to read it. But okay, so from Cheese, Wine, and Bread, I'm just going to read the introduction because it kind of sets up everything that comes after. And you just have to get the book to know what comes after. All right, so introduction. Fermentation. The word comes from the Latin word fermentare, meaning to leaven. Leaven is a noun. Definition, a pervasive influence that modifies something or transforms it for the better. I have no memory of the entire week following the accident. I don't even recall the moments before it, strangely, before my brain was hit the way a pneumatic ram strikes the wheel of cheddar cheese. I'll tell you what I do remember and what I've been told happened in those days. It was my first ski run of the morning on one of the towering peaks of Utah's Canyon Ski Resort, and I was still getting my legs under me when an unruly snowboarder crossed my path, a narrow miss, and I lost control. I gained speed until I went headfirst, sans helmet, into a block of ice, and I tumbled like a rag doll into a nearby ditch. My then boyfriend watched it all happen, which is the only way that I actually have this information, and it feels foreign, like it didn't happen to me. He ran to the crevice and found me face down in the snow. When he rolled my body over, I was unresponsive and brown liquid was seeping from my nose, cerebral fluid. He'd taken various backcountry first aid courses and learned about those indicators. I was unconscious for about 8 minutes, enough time for the medics to caution, she may be paralyzed. On the way to the hospital, as the EMTs whisked me down the slope, I regained consciousness and illogically fought to escape the bindings. Whew, she's not paralyzed. That secured me onto the bodyboard. My mom and dad flew from Ohio to Utah the next day and walked into my hospital room to find their 27-year-old daughter intubated and unresponsive in a medically induced coma. By day 3, I was awake and could respond, but I couldn't remember things as basic as my birthday. My traumatic brain injury prevented much, if any, recollection. You know that crisp autumn apple that goes perfectly with a wedge of brie? Okay, now grab a bat and swing at that apple. Now picture my brain as that apple. I was in bad shape. 5 days after the accident, I was discharged from the hospital, but I was far from my normal self. The doctor's notes indicated there was a blood clot on my thalamus, the part of the brain that relays motor and sensory signals to the cerebral cortex, and an abnormality in the midbrain extending to the pons, part of the brainstem. I vaguely remember moments starting a few days after the crash, like snapshots from a movie I might have seen under the influence of heavy cold medication. It's a highlight reel of being pushed through the airport in a wheelchair, sitting next to my mom on the flight to Ohio. During my first week at my parents' house, I began to comprehend what had happened to me, why I couldn't walk on my own, why I couldn't walk without assistance. My mom supported the weight of my naked body to maneuver me in and out of the bathtub. I began to appreciate the erasure of my memory as a blessing. Well, life had been rolling along splendidly before that. In the 6 years I'd lived in New York City after college graduation, I had worked my way up from the NBC Page program, the highly competitive internship-like job made famous by Tina Fey's television series 30 Rock, to get a job on the Today Show, becoming chummy with the hosts who greeted millions of Americans bright and early every morning. From there, I landed my dream job as an on-camera host at Now This News, a video news startup. Always chasing the next big opportunity, I was looking forward to an upcoming several months long trip to Brazil for a video series about the food of the World Cup. I was dating a man I adored, but mind you, I fully intended on going to Brazil, a single lady, and my career was on the rise. Needless to say, I had a sizable ego. Everything was perfect, or close to it, until everything came to a complete halt. The ensuing 3 months at home were composed of frequent physical therapy sessions and lots of chocolate ice cream. I attribute my recovery to both. The head injury most aggressively affected my vestibular system, the body's balance center. It's why humans can stand on 2 feet without falling over. I fell a lot in those months. Our brains, I learned, are miraculous little self-healing balls. They're elastic like a rubber band and can learn, recover, and adjust accordingly. Slowly, I pieced myself back together, and as I began to feel like myself, the first thing I reached for was my DSLR camera. I started to make videos using the skills from my career, which felt like a parallel life somewhere in the stars, to investigate the things on my mind: love, loyalty, hunger. Hunger, both metaphorically and literally. I voraciously consumed food during my recovery. My brain was working hard to heal and needed every calorie it could get. I was a foodie before the accident, and my curiosity about the role food plays in our identity, our interactions, and our traditions was piqued. I turned on the camera and started recording as I explored these interests. Those videos were the blueprints of what would become my YouTube channel and eventually my new career. The months in Ohio were my cocoon months, and I returned to New York a butterfly. The next couple of years were exciting. Tens of thousands of online followers, flights to Australia and Thailand, Indonesia for video projects, and returning to 30 Rock and the Today Show studio, but this time as a guest rather than as a script runner behind the scenes. If I thought my dreams were coming true before that trip to Utah, after the jolt to my brain, I found a stratosphere that had felt completely unattainable. The man I was falling for at the time of the ski outing, Connor, the guy I was definitely going to break up with for an exciting few months in South America, stayed by my side throughout it all, and a few years later, stood by my side at the altar as we exchanged vows. When Connor's job offered us the opportunity to move to London, we strapped on our metaphorical skis and threw ourselves down the hill. Ready or not, we packed our bags and moved to England. My fingernail traced the grain lines of the wooden table back and forth. I sat alone in my London kitchen, lost in thought, the glow of a single lamp illuminating the darkness of a winter evening. I'd just finished a shift as a cheesemonger at England's preeminent cheese shop, Neal's Yard Dairy, and having put my staff discount to use, I had swaddled a chunk of Montgomery's cheddar before journeying to my apartment in East London, stopping to pick up a deep brown loaf bread along the way. I now lifted my index finger from its fiddling, cut a thick slice of cheese, and hugged it up against the pocketed sourdough crumb of a torn off portion of bread. I reoriented my body in a chair like it was a school desk and I an eager student. I leaned over the table and bit into the bread and cheese. An almost brothy savoriness from the cheddar, a sweetness from the caramelized bread crust, and a yeasty aroma hit my senses. I reached for my red wine, a ruby ambrosia swirled in its glass before I brought it to my lips. I sipped, swallowed, and exhaled. My husband, Connor, was elsewhere that evening. After a day standing on my feet, interacting with customers and spreading the word about British farmhouse cheeses, I contentedly withdrew into an introverted cocoon and opened the book I was reading, An Everlasting Meal by Tamar Adler. I sat cross-legged on the chair and delightedly flipped the pages to a section about cheese, in which Adler accurately writes, cheesemongers are categorically zealous. Their counters are their pulpits, and they live to share their gospel. This woman knows what she's talking about. I couldn't help but notice how the title of the chapter, How to Have Balance, accentuated a woeful lack of balance in my own life. I cycled through my cheese and bread layering routine as I read and subconsciously rubbed the narrow stem of the wine glass as though I were polishing it. I looked through Adler's recipe for savory baked ricotta, the last line of which reads, put bread and cheese and whatever condiments you've chosen on the table. Serve them a salad and not much else. I thought, well, I've got the bread and cheese here, don't have a salad, but I've got wine, and the three are all I need. The next sentence hit me like an emphatic revelation. Wine and beer are the third member of this holy trinity of fermented things. Whack! I looked at the spread on my table and blinked as I reached for an uncapped pen that sat on the countertop. I drew a diagram in the margin of the book, a triangle pointing down. I labeled each corner according to what I saw in front of me, cheese in one, wine in the other, and bread on the apex, facing where I sat. Cheese, wine, and bread. That's it. There's a little bit more to the intro, but I feel like we can end it right there.
Fabulous. Thank you, Katie. And that is such a good, as I was rereading Cheese, Wine, and Bread today, one of the things I was thinking about was just the way it exemplifies my favorite food books are so often about transformation. Of course, the transformation of the food, but then the transformation of usually of the writer who's writing about that food. And what you just, that intro just captured exactly that impulse so well. And it makes me wonder, so your book is this mix of memoir, of firsthand reporting, firsthand research, and you go in as, both a very observant and trained writer, but also as someone who doesn't necessarily know what they're doing, and is trying to learn, right? But then, and you also have recipes. So I'm wondering, like, how do these different types of writing within your book kind of all contribute to these ideas about transformation that the whole book seems to be dealing with?
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head. Like every aspect of this book is transformation, right? Because it was my personal transformation. But then meanwhile, all of these products are being transformed, and a recipe is a transformation, in and of itself. And I think I wondered, like, how much do I hit this idea over the head? Like, how much do I hit the reader over the head with this idea? And I mean, I think I probably did, but hopefully not too much. But yeah, you're right. Transformation underlies absolutely all of it. And I think that when I realized that fermentation is transformation, most people think of fermentation as kimchi, as sauerkraut, as kombucha. They don't think of so many of the things on our daily table, like bread or cheese, as fermentation. So for me, thinking of fermentation as transformation, understanding that it is so many things that surround us in our life and our lives as well. Like, we go through like the stinky, bubbly phases that like a sauerkraut jar goes through as well, before we can come out the other end delicious and ready, right? Ready for the world. And I think it was when I really like connected those dots in my mind, is when I was like, there's something here to write about. And that's, you know, when I put together the book proposal.
Cool. I mean, and why were the recipes important to that? You chose recipes that use the cheese, that use the bread, or excuse me, that use the wine, and that make the bread. Like, what about having those, like the recipe at that level of making was important? So rather, you don't teach us necessarily how to make cheese. You teach us what to do with the cheese.
Right. So okay. So the most honest answer is I wanted this book to be very accessible. Mm-hmm. And yes, I could have like gotten into some nitty gritty of like, here's how to make mozzarella at home, which is very doable, but it is a little more complicated. And so the kind of furthest I went was how to make yogurt at home, because it's
I love that recipe. Everybody, it totally works. I've been screwing up yogurt for years. I don't know how. It's supposed to be easy, but it wasn't for me for some reason. Your recipe, finally.
I'm glad it worked. But basically, I just wanted people to feel, I wanted like the average Joe Schmo, or, you know, anyone to pick up the book, look at the recipes and be like, oh, I could make this for dinner tonight, or this would be perfect when I'm having my friends over this weekend. So that's kind of the quick answer about the recipes that I chose. I wanted them to be things that people would make and make again and make again. Because I have really, like, they're my favorite. They're like the favorite things I make. They're in my repertoire. Okay, and so Kate, I'm going to throw this over to you. A similar question about recipes, because I love the recipes in your book, because they're so, I mean, I'm like laughing as I say it, because sometimes I'm like literally laugh out loud to myself, because they're not only creative, in some ways they're like, dare I use the word, outlandish.
Yeah. I don't think most people would make some of these, but just some of the delight.
Yeah, exactly. No, I love it. Well, and what I mean by outlandish is like that they're not even things that you would eat. For example, hiker's toilet paper, referring to thimbleberry leaves, right? You're not going to eat that. So that's, you know, yes, it's a recipe, sure, but it's like, it's not a digestible one. And then like you have this whipped vanilla body cream, which like legitimately I am going to make like that. Yes. Do you have it right there? Yes.
It's right by my desk. It's really good. It's chapstick too.
It's amazing. Yeah. I was like fully convinced to make it. You have sugar pills, like all of these really, really creative recipes. So, I mean, how did you come up with the recipes to include in this book? Of course, you also have more traditional, delicious recipes. Like I made you zucchini flowers, zucchini blossom stuffed with cheese. Amazing. How did you choose to kind of like have such an array of recipes, and what was the testing process like?
Sure. So early on in writing this book, my interest in the fruit was going beyond its edibility always. In part, I think because I was always kind of interested in fruit that hovered at the edge of edibility, like quince. Raw quince to me, anyways, is almost inedible.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Is that a part of the difficulty of them?
yeah, and
on the edge.
that was one of the most immediate difficulties that I could perceive when I first started wanting to write about this. But then a lot of the book is also really interested in the relationship between food and medicine, and when does food cross that line into something that we're using to heal ourselves, and when does that cross the line into something that is no longer healing us, but that we're clinging to in a dysfunctional way. And I don't have a straight answer for any of that, but and I like that. I like that element of it. And so there's 2 recipes that go with every single chapter, and there's 26 chapters. And my goal initially was to have one edible recipe and one inedible. So for a cosmetic, for a medicine, for a gardening technique, just some other way that you might use this fruit to remind people that fruit has capabilities beyond nourishing humans, right? So that's where bandolin comes in. That's a gel that you can make from quince seeds just by putting quince seeds in water. They exude this kind of clear, soft gel, and you can use it in your hair. People used to use it in their hair. You can also just drink it with some hot water, and it helps soothe sore throats. And just the opportunity to go and discover the ways we wear our fruit, the ways we heal with our fruit, the ways that we poison with our fruit. The recipes offered just such a clear structure within which I could do that.
So what was the testing process like? Because some of them are like kind of like you must have had to really go out of your way to test these. Yeah.
But I did it. Yes and no. So part of there's so many fruits that I could have chosen that I didn't choose. And something was chosen was because I had access to it. And I made up these kind of arbitrary rules for why I would have access to something, because we live in the 21st century. Almost anything can be just FedExed to us. And that felt like cheating to me. So my arbitrary rule is kind of like the fruit needs to come to me in kind of a coincidental way or in a geographical way, like a memoirish biographical way. I've got to have some kind of real connection to it through a person. So that's why I have medlar instead of mangosteen, for example.
Yeah. Well, and the geographical angle of your book is something that I definitely picked up, because when I was reading about huckleberry and you're talking about like your memories of growing up with it and stuff, like growing up in Ohio, huckleberry, it really became, I think that that geographical angle of your book, it really came through. Like, okay, this is what it would be like to be a Pacific Northwest girl.
Well, I'm hopeful that through describing the fruits that are particular to me and like my psychotope, you could call it. So the topography that created my psyche, that would perhaps inspire the reader to think about their own fruits, their own.
Yes.
I suppose. So
psychotope is such a good word.
Right. I learned that in a poetry class, of course.
Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, I guess let's take it from there. Like you're a poet. You've written books of poetry. How did a book like this differ, and how was it similar? I mean, you just so seamlessly and beautifully integrate personal storytelling and real information. Like I learned a lot. I was like, oh, pectin, like I didn't like these things like that. So I mean, I'm kind of going off on a couple questions here.
I think I did some of what you do in your book as well, as I'm trying through language to find a way to relate my story to the food that I'm also talking about. So when you describe, your head being rung like a cheddar wheel with a pneumatic hammer, or that apple getting smashed, those are careful language choices that you're bringing to bear on your story so that you can weave this other story about food in a cool, seamless way. And I think when I studied poetry, I think that that's something that reading poems, writing poems taught me to pay attention to those kind of verticals, and how they let us connect things that don't seem related and to relate them. So yeah, that's the kind of easy answer on that.
Well, yeah, no, I love that. And so much of both of our books are about like kind of connecting things, right? And because we both use all kinds of aspects of in terms of story, science, education, and weaving it together. You also, I'm just trying to picture how you could have possibly planned out your book. I'm even thinking about the titles of the chapters because, for instance, you chose face clock for F, which is another word for dandelion. Like, I didn't know that. But like pretty much every chapter has like also called and then 5 other names. So like, how did you possibly choose? I'm just picturing this like insane color-coded spreadsheet that you must have had. Like, this could go for this letter, this could go for this letter.
Yeah.
What was the reality of how that went?
I mean, that kind of the way, a lot of my choices of which fruit to do for which letter ended up kind of just being along the lines of, can I figure out the story? Is there just some spark that makes me want to spend a bunch of time with it in the library?
Oh, I love that.
And then if the answer was yes, whew, okay, I got that letter, but then that would eliminate another story that I might want to tell. And I just had to kind of keep moving forward, regardless, and kind of having faith in the fact that there are so many names for so many things.
Yeah.
It could be a little bit manipulative in how I do that because it's my book, and that though my form was really giving me an outline, the form being the abecedarian was giving me an outline of how to go from A to Z. It also, when it got restrictive, when I wanted to break that form, I could do that every now and then. Not too often, because I think then the reader would be like, I thought this was a book about fruit. And
well, like with lump, L for lump is one that comes to my mind, a really, really powerful chapter. But I remember when I first saw the chapter, the title, like L for lump, I was like, oh, there's a fruit called lump? I didn't know. And I kept reading and I was like,
from the Presidents of the United States of America song, don't you know?
No.
No, I'm just kidding. Right, and that's a chapter that I think really heightens that the metaphorical relationship between fruit and the body that I'm talking about throughout this whole book, because I'm talking about lumps as in possibly cancerous tumors, possibly benign tumors, but also pregnancies, these kind of growths that bring new life or take life away. And the way that in the doctor's office, they're usually described to us in terms of the size of fruits. Right, which is funny, and of course it's a chapter about a cancer scare, and that's not funny. But when you talk about dark things like that, it is kind of nice to have a little joke. I have a question for you that comes from what you just read in your intro, which is, I've been wondering, what is it about cheesemongers that makes them evangelists? Like, as opposed to sommeliers, as opposed to bakers, like what is it about cheese or cheesemakers that makes them be like, you have to try this, I gotta talk to you?
Yeah, I've asked myself this question so often, and as a cheesemonger myself, living that life, and I don't know that there's a simple question or a simple answer to that question. I think cheese is an accepting product, more so than wine, obviously, more so than bread, in that with bread, it kind of, there's a thing of like toil and like waking up super early in the morning and being in front of a hot oven all day. And, with cheese, I think
Not
it's
in
like
such a good mood. It sounds like if you're a baker, maker, you can sleep in.
If you're happy, you're making this thing a lot of people really love. And yeah, I don't know, it is really interesting, but I totally fell into it. There's something incredibly joyful about asking people to try different cheeses and like, try this, and is this what you thought it would be? What are you tasting? Yeah, I don't have a good answer except for to just verify that, yeah, it is really true. It is, and I was completely sucked in it as well as a cheesemonger myself. It's a pretty awesome job, actually. Well, and so let's talk about cheese, because a lot of people might not know that in addition to being a writer, you're also you are a cheesemaker in and of your own right.
Yeah, I'm late to pick up my milk today. I'm gonna do that right after this.
You have this
I have
event.
an illegal milk hookup about a mile from my house. I gotta go pick it up from somebody's porch.
So, like, how's your cheese making going? What can you say to the folks about cheese making?
Yeah, so I've been learning how to make cheese from Laura Lee Misterly, who is an expert artisanal cheesemaker up in Rice, Washington, which is it's on the north part of the Columbia River, close to Canada. She runs a place called Coolisasket Farm and a domestic art school out there. And I've been trying to learn how to make cheese from her by just hanging out with her a lot. So she can give me her recipes easy, but she lives on a farm. I live in Spokane, which is a city, and try to translate what she does to my kitchen means that I'm really making different cheese than what she's been instructing me to make. And that's okay. That's what she always expected. The other thing that's been happening is that since I had a child, Cy, who you sort of met on the other side of the door to break in earlier, he's 13 months. So half of my brain is still with him and keeping him alive in the first years of his life. And I found that a lot of cheese making is a kind of attention that I do not have right now. And I hadn't appreciated how important. I mean, you talk about this when you were talking about Mary Holbrook, that fantastic cheesemaker. You're saying Mary was instinctive with how she. Oh wait, no, wait. Yeah, Mary was instinctive with how she treated the cheese. She paid attention, and it's all about attention with cheese making. And I can verify that's true. So my hope is that my mistakes will become delicious soon.
Well, something that's really interesting about cheese making in England specifically, and the kinds of cheeses in England, is that the way that cheese making came about in England is that it was the women of the house, the wives, the mothers, who made cheese, and they had a full house of kids at home. And so that is why those cheeses, because they timed their cheeses in their day of all of these household chores and duties, and therefore the milk sat for longer. The lactic acid bacteria proliferated more. There is a higher acidity cheese, and therefore the final product, they're crumblier, which we know the crumbliness of British cheeses, but we don't know why, and we don't know that it is very historical and has everything to do with
the fact that that's true. That happens. That's happening here right now.
So even if you're making a non-British cheese, you're giving it a British style spin just because of your circumstances.
Oh man, well, it looks like we've got a question in from the audience. Janet Ruffin is asking, what is next? Katie, what is next for you?
Oh, Kate. So some of you may or may not know that I'm based in Italy. I've lived in Italy for a little over a year, back home now for the holidays in this moment. So this is technically my second book, but the first kind of like big publishing house book. And I would really I want to write another book. I loved every little step of this process, and I really want to write another book. And so I'm kind of working on that. That's the big thing. Kate, what's up with you?
What's it about?
Well, it is about Italy and food.
Cool.
Italy, food, culture. Yeah.
Cool. Excellent. You can look forward to that.
What about you, Kate?
Oh, I think since the motherhood has and trying to figure out childcare and writing and work and all that stuff has really changed the way that I can pay attention, as we talked about, but also my time. And so I have not been able to finish very much this year. It's very short. So I have been working towards actually just being okay with that, and kind of gathering what there is to gather right now of things that I'm understanding now, hanging out with Cy, my son, and hanging out with Sam, my husband, and being, in quarantine in Spokane with a very good supply of raw materials to cook with, and about 4 hours a day with which to write, which is not too shabby, right? I can do something with that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's that, but then within that, I'm trying to collect stories of, I guess, foodways stories of this place, the Inland Northwest, which isn't necessarily known as a great food place, but it is actually the source of fantastic things. Like some of the best wheat in the world comes from here. One of the oldest artisanal handmade small batch cheese farms is close to here. That's Coolsasket Farm. So
Yeah.
I'm doing interviews, just following up stories, trying to get a sense of the kind of the food culture and history of this funny place where I live.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So Beth is asking where in Italy. I live in Puglia, which is South Italy. It's the heel of the boot, right? If Italy is shaped like a stiletto heel, it is like that little stiletto portion. So along the Adriatic coast in the south, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And yeah, so I'm not. I never know. I'm still at a place where I'm like, do I share this? Do I not share it? But I am starting to share it. I have not yet publicly, but the actual next big thing for me is actually that I'm pregnant. I'm about 4 months pregnant. So I imagine, so I'm working on a
The water's fine. It's warm.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I'm actually like, I'm loving hearing this, how you are doing all of the things, how you're writing, how you're cheese making, right? How you're exploring all of these things while you managing to keep a human alive, which is
It's the
pretty
best.
amazing.
It's the best. Everything slows down.
Yeah, good. I'm ready for that. Yeah, Kate, do you have like maybe a cheese making book up your sleeve or something?
Well, I'm hoping to write about Laura Lee, and that is something I'm slowly working towards. So it took me about 7 years to really find like the form and the voice for the Book of Difficult Fruit. And I've been thinking about this book with Laura Lee now for about 3. So hopefully that means I get to start writing soon.
Yeah.
I'm really, when I wrote my cookbook Pie School, I think I had about 2 years of pie making under my belt and about 9 months to write that book in. And that was my crash course in if you don't, like, what happens when you don't have kind of a lifetime of experience behind you to write from. And it was fine to write a book that way, but this time I really want to be able to take a lot more time with my subject and know more through time and repetition rather than research.
Yeah.
Will be there as well.
Time is such a luxury, isn't it?
Oh, we've got another question. And then I think we'll probably need to wrap things up. It's almost 6 p.m. Thank you everyone so much for hanging out with us on this Tuesday night.
Yes.
Jane's asking, what are the types of and kinds of wine you drink, recommend with the food and cheese you make?
Wait, where are you? Sorry, can you say it again? I don't see where you're reading it.
Jane's wondering, what types of wine do you drink and would you recommend with the type of food and cheese that you're making? I think it's for both of us, so I'll take the cheese question, you take the food question.
Okay. So, well, and ironically, a lot of people like cheese and wine pairings is like such a thing people talk about, and like, hey, obviously I wrote about cheese and wine and I love them both and I love them together. I have to tell you the truth and say, I think that beer pairs better with a lot of cheeses than wine does.
I was going to say the same thing. So
yeah, no, and so I always like, and it's interesting because like, well, I don't write about beer in the book, but in terms of pairings, yeah, Kate, I'm glad you and I are on the same page with that. So there's no conflict here.
Well, I mean, part of my palate changed after my pregnancy, and I actually kind of stopped liking wine and started to love bitter and kind of sour and beers all of a sudden. So that's part of why I'm now pairing them with cheeses.
Interesting. Okay. In terms of my favorite wines in general, I have come to really love and appreciate the wines from Southern Italy, near where I am. Primitivo, Negro Amaro, Fiano, this beautiful white wine. there's just endless things to explore. And I write about much of it in the book, but so much to explore.
This has been so much fun.
Thanks so much for having us.
Oh
So
my
much
gosh.
fun. And
Thank you both.
Maureen, I have not tried Cougar Gold. Kate has.
It
Oh.
comes in a can.
Oh my gosh, how can I get it?
I
Could
think
I get it in the
get it
Midwest?
online. No, it's from WSU, which is the Washington State University in Pullman. And I can't remember how many years they've been making it, but they really scaled up their production. And now I think it's pretty easy to order it online.
Yeah,
Order
you should
now.
be able to order it.
Maureen, I'm gonna order it literally as soon as this is over. Thank you for the tip. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cougar Gold.
All right. Thank you so much, both of you. Congratulations on your wonderful books.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Don't forget, you can also get a really wonderful vanilla bean.
Yeah, you can make that lotion we were talking about.
Right? So good. Oh, I want to make that. Yeah.
Get these books, y'all. Get these books and get the vanilla bean. That's that's a win right there.
Totally. I hope that you both have a really lovely holiday season. And Katie, congratulations.
Thank you.
Such fun news. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I hope everybody's staying safe and healthy. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Have a good
Thanks,
evening.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Ciao, ciao.